And joining me now to discuss America's shifting foreign policy is John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist and former diplomacy consultant for the State Department. John, it's great to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Steve. Thank you.
Of course, John, President Biden meeting with Israeli President Isaac Herzog at the White House today. The U.S. has been pushing for more humanitarian aid in Gaza. A State Department spokesperson today describing the new procedures and expanded aid corridors Israel has added over the last 30 days. I want to play a soundbite and get his take.
We at this time have not made an assessment that that the Israelis are in violation of U.S. law.
John, how has the United States policy on humanitarian aid impacted Israel?
First of all, the U.S. has been extraordinarily generous to the Palestinian people in Gaza. It's been very, very unfortunate that they have suffered as grievously as they have because of the desire of Hamas to sacrifice as many Palestinians as possible in what they knew would be a severe and overwhelming retaliation by Israeli forces for the 11th century barbarism that was perpetrated on Israeli civilians in October of last year. The U.S. wants to be as honest a broker as possible between Israel and the Palestinian groups that could potentially be partners in the future. Unfortunately, that seems to be out of the reach right now of any serious diplomacy. As long as Hamas continues to be the obstinate party, the party that continues to maintain hostages, that refuses to reach a peace agreement, and that continues to be funded, equipped, trained, and organized by Iran, which really is the crux of the problem right now in the Middle East, with Hamas simply playing out one of the multidimensional battles against Israel.
John, I want to get your thoughts on China, switching gears from Israel. Trump is floating multiple well-known China hawks to be in his cabinet. Senator Marco Rubio's name is being floated as Secretary of State. Representative Mike Waltz, as we saw, National Security Advisor. This evening, Trump announcing he's picked John Ratcliffe as the next CIA director. All people who are very clear on the threat that China, the Communist Party, poses to the United States. How do you think China may be assessing these developments?
I believe the Chinese government has been expecting a tougher line from the Trump administration because candidate Trump, now President-elect Trump, and soon to be President Trump, has made very clear his overarching goal in terms of foreign policy is to restore the credibility of American deterrence, to rebuild it, to strengthen it, to reinforce it. And that, hopefully, from Trump's perspective, will avoid any new hot wars, as we saw with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and of course, with the Iranian attacks on Israel through Hamas, through Hezbollah, Shia militia in Iraq and Syria, the Houthi that are cutting off shipping in the Red Sea. All of this activity could have been deterred, according to President Trump, if America had taken a stronger posture. And now with China, it's very important that we send a message to Beijing that their very aggressive, belligerent activity, not only against Taiwan, but also increasingly against Japan, against the Philippines, and other Southeast Asian tiger countries bordering the South China Sea, is unacceptable. The U.S. intends to push back, but very carefully, Steve. I think President Trump is signaling very clearly there is no American desire for war with China over Taiwan. The question is to make any possible military invasion or naval blockade by China of Taiwan so painful to China that it will not move in that direction today, tomorrow, or anytime soon.
John, I'd like to get your assessment on China's unrestricted warfare against the United States, and could increased tensions between the U.S. and China push the CCP closer to Iran? And what are the chances we see Trump implement tariffs as a national security weapon against China?
Well, let's keep in mind, Steve, first of all, China is close to Iran. Several years ago, they struck a 40-year deal for China to build supposedly billions of dollars worth of major infrastructure in Iran, none of which has substantively proceeded with yet. And China is buying enormous amounts of Iranian oil at discount in violation of U.S. and international sanctions. And unfortunately, it was the Biden administration's decision to not enforce those sanctions that allowed anywhere from maybe $80 to $100 billion in oil exports, primarily to China, but also to other countries, to fill up the coffers for Iran, not to provide for the well being of their own citizenry, but to fund militia, proxy groups, and terrorists throughout the Middle East. So China and Iran already have a close relationship. But in terms of tariffs, I think President Trump is positioning right now for negotiations that are going to be very tough. And I don't think it'll just be 100 to 200% tariffs on electric vehicles and other Chinese industries that threaten American markets, but also sending a very strong signal to China overall that it needs to begin complying with World Trade Organization criteria that it's been violating with relative impunity over the last 2 decades. We want to see China stop dumping excess industrial and labor capacity worldwide, stop with the intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and so many distortions of the global economy that have allowed China to rise to where it is right now in ways that very much threaten its Asian neighbors and that of our European allies as well.
John, lastly, how might these tariffs impact China's economy given the current fragility, if you will?
My own sense is that Xi Jinping is highly concerned, and for all the right reasons, that the tariffs could do enormous damage to China's economy. Keep in mind that the US and Chinese economies are very interdependent, probably a colossal strategic blunder on the part of the United States, but this is where we are today. And we, of course, are looking to re-globalize, to move our supply chains away from dependence on China. But China is so dependent for its export economy because Xi Jinping has decided to not boost consumer spending and to enhance the consumer economy in China, but to export excess industrial labor and capacity and goods. They need access to the American market. And if tariffs close off that access, there could be very deep deleterious impacts on the Chinese economy, which is already saddled with enormous debt from the real estate and construction industries, skyrocketing youth unemployment, and a number of other issues that keep Xi's concerns very much domestically focused, as well as on the eventual trade negotiations with Trump.
A colossal strategic blunder. I don't think that point could be overstated. John Sitilides, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.